Having been raised my entire childhood in a Jacksonville, Florida orphanage, I had very little to be thankful for. In November of 1999, I sat down and I began to write about my life as a child. Having only a sixth grade education, I could barely spell without the help of a dictionary. As I began to write, people told me that there was something special about my stories, something that touched their hearts. I have taken what I consider to be the best of my stories and I've put them on a CD. I hope that when you hear my stories that they will touch your heart. I hope they will make you appreciate your children, your life, and hopefully be thankful for all that you have been given in this life. The Last Gunfighter. As I look back upon my years at the Children's Home Society Orphanage in Jacksonville, Florida, I am really amazed that many of the children living there did not turn out to be serial killers. I cannot possibly count the murder plots by both boys and girls aimed at our caretakers. The children, many only 7 or 8 years old, with no one to turn to, were only trying to protect themselves. For years, this mean and evil woman had molested many of the young boys, including me. The daily beatings with the long green bamboo cane poles or the dreaded sandpapered bolo paddle became more than we could bear. The incident that I remember the most would be the day we boys met in our underground fort, talking about doing away with the mean and hateful matron Mother Winters. The small, dark, damp underground fort became quiet as a straw was drawn by each boy. A flicker of light and a faint crackling still resonating from the small pile of leaves and pine straw, which just minutes before had given us some form of light. I bent down and blew into the small pile of embers, causing it to flare up for only a second or two. No one said a word as little Billy Smith drew the short straw. Wayne Evers reached under his torn wool shirt and he pulled out the silver Western-style gun and slowly handed it to Billy. "I don't really want to kill anybody," he mumbled. The small, dark room remained totally quiet. "Here's the bullet," I told him, holding out the small, hard, round piece of acorn. The specially prepared acorn had been sanded down on the concrete sidewalk and made to fit precisely into the barrel of the gun. Under the hammer, we had placed 6 red caps. Careful testing had shown us that 4 caps forced the projectile forward with enough energy to hurt our hand. We concluded that 6 caps would cause the bullet to enter someone's brain if placed against the back of their neck, in an upward position, and then fired. Later that evening, 60 children sat at their places in the large dining room. Not being allowed to talk during our meals, the only noise heard was the sound of silverware. Everyone stopped eating when little Billy raised his hand to ask permission to go to the bathroom. Mother Winters motioned for him to come to her position. When he reached her location, he bent forward and whispered, "I have to use the bathroom." She stared at him for several seconds and then waved her hand for him to move away from her. Billy stepped back several paces and he stopped. "Why didn't you piss before coming to dinner, you little bastard?" she screamed at him. Billy lowered his head and looked down at the floor. "Miss Mamie, would you like some more coffee?" asked the black cook, Charity, as she opened the kitchen door located behind Mother Winters. Mother Winters turned toward the kitchen to answer Charity. When she did, little Billy Smith raised his shirt, pulled out the Fanner 50 silver pistol, and slowly began moving it toward her neck. Many of the boys covered their eyes and some covered their ears. Bam! Went the pistol as it fired. A small puff of smoke rose from the weapon. Mother Winters' body moved to the left several inches before she reached up and grabbed her neck. Slowly, she turned towards Billy, reached up and grabbed him around his neck. With both hands, she began squeezing as hard as she could. Matron Castile jumped up and grabbed a metal chair and began to beat Billy on his back. Billy just stood there, his face turning beet red. When Matron Castile hit Billy in the head with a chair, his body began to shake and his eyes rolled back into his head, and he fell to the floor. By now, children were running everywhere. Most of us boys made our way out onto the screened-in terrace and huddled down in the corner for protection. Several minutes later, little Billy, his body totally limp, was dragged out into the yard where he was thrown into the dirt. Many of the girls were still crying. Many continued to shake and scream at the top of their lungs. As we boys broke away from our huddle, we made our way back to our large 2-story white brick building and hid in various places throughout the dormitory. No one said a word about what had happened. I guess we were just too scared. Later that evening, when little Billy entered the shower room, everyone became quiet. Now the entire side of his face was black and blue and bloody, and tears were rolling down both his cheeks. He stood there with a comatose look on his face. One at a time, we boys walked up to little Billy and began to pat him on the back and shake his hand. He tried to smile, yet he continued to cry. Little Billy Smith was the first hero I ever met. As I look back over the past 50 years, I see that most of the children who were raised with me in the orphanage went to prison, became drug addicts, alcoholics, prostitutes, or ended up committing suicide. However, I never heard about any one of them ever killing anyone. I guess that's because no one as mean, evil, and cruel as Matron Mother Winters ever crossed their path.